We just found a large stone carving on top of an earthwork next to Brandywine Creek and several ancient canoe anchors on the bank of the river. Later on, I'll show you how to go see them for yourselves, and I ask that if you do visit, please comment on this video, the date, and when you saw them. It won't be long before they disappear into a museum's basement, never to be seen or studied again. Boston Township is in Summit County and is situated at almost an equal distance between the cities of Akron and Cleveland, and it's at the heart of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Containing two villages, Peninsula and Boston Heights, this area has much more history than is at first apparent. Most folks are probably familiar with the Boston Mills area as Helltown. Stories written by paranormal enthusiasts cite the Indian burial mound, which is now at the town cemetery, and the toxic waste dump called the Krajiki Superfund site, which is intersected by Interstate 271 as it passes through the forest. There's also some rubbish out there about the church at the center of the village being a place of satanic worship, but that's probably as credible as the stories of the giant serpent slithering through the woods as a result of radioactive toxic waste. Local historian Joe Jasinski wrote in his book, An Archaeological Survey of the Cuyahoga River Valley, that the town cemetery was also once an Indian burial plot. An old local resident remembers how his grandfather, once the town gravedigger, often had to relocate Indian skeletons to make room for his current clients. This knoll is also the site of the first structure to be built by a settler, as well as being the final resting place of notorious local counterfeiter James Brown. An interesting side note is that Boston used to be home to a massive counterfeiting operation. According to the History of Summit County, written in 1881 by Perrin, in 1832, the counterfeiting reached the zenith of its power and circulation, and at that period is said to have been the most extensive banking establishment in Ohio, if not the Union. There were branch offices or banks in Cleveland, in Rising Sun, Indiana, in Vermont, and in other sections of the country. Just a little under a mile northeast of the Boston Cemetery is the Stanford Knoll site, where they have found archaic and early woodland artifacts, but most studies are focused on the early settlers. Next is the area at the intersection of Columbia and Riverview Road, just south of the Conrad Ranger Station. At least I hope it's pronounced like that. This is where a native Ottawa chief named Pontiac had a camp. This chieftain also led what is called Pontiac's War from 1763 to 1765 against the British. The British, specifically led by one General Amherst, pictured here wondering why he's wearing medieval armor in the 18th century. This was also the time when the British notoriously used biological warfare by giving the Native Americans blankets used by victims of smallpox from Fort Pitt. Just a little way up the Buckeye Trail is a spot Charles Whittlesley identified as an earth fort. As we continue to follow Joe Jasinski's map, we head east across the Cuyahoga to a site known as Indian Hill. Apparently, the settlers said lots of artifacts were found at this mound, but it was dug into for commercial gravel operations and is completely destroyed. Whoops. Slightly to the northwest, at the intersection of West Highland or Vaughan Road and Riverview, is a mass burial site that was discovered during topsoil excavations. No records were kept, and archaeologists were unable to identify anything. Another whoopsie. Next, we're heading back east across the Cuyahoga to a place called Red Lock, where supposedly there was a large mound that was plowed through, spilling human remains during the construction of the Erie Canal. There's a lot more sites, but you should be getting the gist of what I'm showing you here. Now onto the artifacts we found. If you ever find yourself hiking the Stanford Trail starting at the Stanford House, you head north, you'll come across a big bridge across a quarry. As you're hiking, you'll probably notice a lot of strange terraces, almost as if they were man-made for an agricultural floodplain, agrarian community perhaps that relied a lot on growing their own corn or beans or squash for subsistence. The stone artifact we found is almost exactly 150 meters northwest of the end of the bridge. I'll put the exact coordinates in the video description below.